I died clutching a divorce petition that would never be filed. The last thing I saw was my husband Marcus Wellington kissing his secretary Vanessa in our marble foyer, while I bled out on our Persian rug, victim of what the newspapers would call a quote, tragic home invasion. What they didn't know was that Marcus had orchestrated it all. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. But death wasn't the end. I woke up gasping in our king-sized bed, silk sheets damp with sweat, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The digital clock read 7:32 a.m. March 15th, exactly 1 year before my murder. I was back in our penthouse overlooking Manhattan, back in my 32-year-old body, back to the morning that would change everything. That's when I heard it, a voice that wasn't spoken aloud. God, I can't wait to get rid of her. Just 1 more year of this charade and Vanessa and I can finally be together openly. I bolted upright. Marcus was in the shower, his voice echoing off marble tiles, but his lips weren't moving. Those words had come from inside his mind, and somehow, impossibly, I could hear them. The water shut off and Marcus emerged, toweling his dark hair. At 45, he still maintained the physique that had caught my attention at Harvard Business School 15 years ago. His steel gray eyes met mine in the mirror as he adjusted his Armani tie. "You're up early, Rebecca," he said with that practiced smile that had fooled me for so long. "Sleep well?" I forced my expression to remain neutral. "Like the dead." His thoughts cut through the morning air like a blade. If only. Vanessa's birthday is next week. I'll need to find an excuse to be away from this frigid wife of mine. The casual cruelty in his mental voice made my stomach turn. In my previous life, I had believed Marcus when he said he was working late, traveling for business, building our empire. I had trusted him when he claimed the lipstick on his collar was from a client's greeting, when strange perfume lingered on his shirts when he became distant and cold. "I have to head to the office early today," he said, straightening his platinum cufflinks. "Board meeting." Another lie. In my mind, I heard his real plans. "Vanessa's wearing that red dress today, the one that drives me crazy. We'll have 2 hours before anyone else arrives." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to confront him right there. But I had lived through this year once before, and I knew better now. Marcus Wellington, CEO of Wellington Financial Empire, was not just a cheating husband. He was a calculating predator who had married me for my trust fund and planned to eliminate me once he'd transferred enough assets to himself and his precious Vanessa. "Have a good day, darling," I said sweetly, watching him gather his briefcase. He paused at the bedroom door, and for a moment his thoughts shifted. Sometimes I forget how beautiful she is. If only she wasn't so boring. Vanessa understands me in ways Rebecca never could. The door clicked shut, and I was alone with the devastating knowledge of what was to come. In my previous timeline, I had remained the dutiful wife, attending charity galas, managing our household staff, believing I was building a life with the man I loved. I had been blind to the web of financial manipulation Marcus had woven around me, slowly transferring my inheritance into accounts I couldn't access, all while planning my eventual demise. But this time would be different. This time, I had an advantage Marcus could never anticipate. I could hear the thoughts of everyone around me. And I intended to use that power to destroy him before he could destroy me. I slipped into my silk robe and padded barefoot to Marcus's home office. The mahogany door was locked, but I knew where he hid the key, inside a hollow book on our bedroom shelf. Within minutes, I was seated at his desk, powering up his computer. Password: Vanessa2024. Of course, the screen illuminated, revealing documents that made my blood run cold. Transfer agreements, life insurance policies with Vanessa as the secret beneficiary, and a detailed timeline labeled Project Freedom. My murder had been scheduled with the precision of a corporate merger. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands trembling as I discovered the depth of his betrayal. Marcus had been planning this for over 2 years, slowly poisoning our marriage while positioning himself to inherit my family's fortune. The home invasion that killed me had been staged by professionals he'd hired through intermediaries. Clean, untraceable, perfect. But the most devastating discovery was a folder labeled Rebecca's Replacement. Inside were psychological profiles, financial assessments, and detailed plans for his new life with Vanessa. She wasn't just his secretary and mistress. She was his partner in this elaborate scheme. A sound in the hallway made me freeze. I quickly closed the files, powered down the computer, and slipped back into our bedroom just as Mrs. Chen, our housekeeper, knocked softly. "Mrs. Wellington, your breakfast is ready." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I'll be down in a moment." I could hear her thoughts clearly. Poor woman. She has no idea what Mr. Wellington is doing behind her back. If only I could tell her about the other woman, but I need this job. Even our staff knew about Vanessa. I had been the only fool in the dark. Downstairs in our marble-appointed kitchen, I sat at the breakfast nook overlooking Central Park, mechanically eating toast while my mind raced. I had 365 days before Marcus would have me killed. In that time, I needed to not only protect myself but turn the tables completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus thought he was the predator, but he had no idea he was about to become the prey. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jennifer. "Coffee this afternoon? I have news about that job opportunity." In my previous life, I had dismissed Jennifer's offer to join her investment firm, content to remain a wealthy housewife. But now I saw it for what it truly was, an escape route I had been too naive to take. I typed back, "Absolutely. In fact, I think I'm ready to get back into finance." This time, I wouldn't be the victim. This time, Marcus Wellington would learn what it meant to underestimate Rebecca Hartwell, the woman who came back from the dead with a year's worth of insider knowledge and the ability to hear his every treacherous thought. The game was about to begin, and I intended to win everything. That afternoon, I met Jennifer at Café Noir, a trendy spot near Wall Street, where power lunches and life-changing conversations happened over overpriced lattes. Jennifer Hayes had been my roommate at Wharton, and despite her petite frame and honey blonde hair, she was a financial shark who'd built Hayes Capital from nothing into a $100 million investment firm. "Rebecca, you look different," she said, studying my face as I slid into the booth across from her. "More focused." I had dressed carefully for this meeting, a navy Chanel suit that projected competence without threatening Marcus's ego. In my previous life, I had worn flowing dresses and soft colors, playing the role of decorative wife. That woman was dead. "I've been thinking about what you said last month," I began, "about the position at your firm." Jennifer's thoughts rang clear. Finally! I've been waiting years for her to wake up and realize she's wasting her MBA and her brilliant mind playing house with that snake. "The senior analyst position is still open," she said aloud. "But Rebecca, are you sure? This isn't a part-time charity board position. We're talking 60-hour weeks, high-stakes deals, serious responsibility." "I'm ready for serious responsibility." Her mental voice was excited. She has no idea how perfect this timing is. I just landed the Blackstone merger, and I need someone I can trust completely. Someone Marcus doesn't know is working with me. That last thought made me pause. "What do you mean about Marcus?" Jennifer hesitated, then leaned forward. "Can I be completely honest with you?" I nodded, though I could already hear her thoughts forming. "Marcus has been quietly acquiring our client companies through shell corporations. Nothing illegal, but aggressive. Almost like he's trying to corner someone." The pieces clicked together. In my previous timeline, Marcus had been systematically targeting Jennifer's clients, undermining her business to eliminate potential allies I might have after his plan succeeded. He'd been more thorough than I'd realized. "What if I told you I want to help you fight back?" I said carefully. Jennifer's eyes lit up. "I'd say it's about time you showed some teeth." We spent the next 2 hours mapping out a strategy. Jennifer needed capital for a hostile takeover of Meridian Industries, a tech company Marcus was pursuing. As Mrs. Marcus Wellington, I had access to substantial personal funds that Marcus hadn't yet found ways to control. Money from my grandmother's estate that was held in trusts he couldn't touch. "This is incredibly risky, Rebecca," Jennifer warned as we prepared to leave. "If Marcus finds out you're working against his interests..." "Let me worry about Marcus," I said, signing the employment contract she'd brought. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow. We need to move fast on Meridian." Walking back to the penthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. In my previous life, I had died feeling helpless and betrayed. This time, I was taking control. But the real test came that evening when Marcus returned home. "You seem cheerful," he observed, loosening his tie as he entered our living room. His thoughts were immediately suspicious. "She's never this happy when I come home. What's she up to?" A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. I had lunch with Jennifer today, I said, settling onto our white leather sofa with a glass of wine. His mental alarm bells went off. Jennifer Hayes. Dangerous. I need to know what they discussed. Oh? How is she? He asked with feigned casualness. Struggling, actually. Her firm is having cash flow problems. She might have to close by year's end. The lie came easily, and Marcus's relief was palpable in his thoughts. Good. One less complication to deal with. I was worried she might try to influence Rebecca. That's unfortunate, he said aloud, though his mind was celebrating. I curled up against him, playing the affectionate wife while listening to his thoughts. How was your board meeting? Productive. Very productive. His mental voice was smug. Vanessa looked incredible in that red dress. We barely made it to the conference room before I had her bent over my desk. Rebecca could never make me feel the way Vanessa does. I wanted to pour my wine over his perfectly styled head, but instead I smiled and traced patterns on his chest. I'm proud of how hard you work for us. That night, as Marcus slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned. He believed I was the same naive wife he'd married, too trusting and dependent to pose any threat. He had no idea that I was about to dismantle his entire world using the very financial acumen he'd dismissed for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Meridian's board accepted our preliminary offer. They're intrigued by the anonymous investor backing us. Marcus is going to be furious when he finds out someone outbid him. I smiled in the darkness. Let him be furious. In my previous life, Marcus had controlled the narrative, keeping me isolated and dependent. This time, I was writing my own story. The next morning, I dressed in a sharp black suit and informed Marcus I was going shopping with my mother. Tell Eleanor I said hello, he said, barely looking up from his tablet. His thoughts were elsewhere. Vanessa wants to look at engagement rings today. Soon I won't have to pretend with Rebecca anymore. Instead of shopping, I went to Hayes Capital's sleek offices in the financial district. Jennifer had prepared a corner office for me, complete with 3 monitors displaying real-time market data. Welcome to the war room, she said, handing me a stack of files. These are all the companies Marcus has targeted in the past 6 months. Notice a pattern? I did. Every company was either connected to my family's business interests or provided services that would be crucial for someone trying to liquidate large assets quickly. Marcus hadn't just been planning my death. He'd been positioning himself to rapidly convert my inheritance into untraceable wealth. He's been setting up an entire underground network, I realized. Exactly. But here's what he doesn't know. 3 of these companies are controlled by shells that trace back to my clients. We've been watching his moves for months. Jennifer pulled up a complex organizational chart on her main screen. Marcus thinks he's playing chess, but he's actually been playing checkers. Every move he's made has been anticipated. My phone rang. Marcus. Where are you, darling? I tried to reach your mother, but she said you weren't there. I stepped into a conference room and closed the door. I'm having my hair done. You know how long these appointments take. His suspicion was growing. She's lying. Her voice sounds different, more confident. Of course. I'll see you tonight, I said, keeping my tone light. Rebecca? His voice carried a warning I recognized from my previous life. You know I love you, don't you? The same words he'd used before having me killed. My hand tightened on the phone. I love you too, Marcus. After hanging up, I sat in the conference room for a moment, steadying myself. Marcus was getting nervous, which meant he might accelerate his timeline. I needed to move faster. Jennifer knocked and entered. Everything okay? He's suspicious. We need to expedite everything. Already on it. I've scheduled a meeting with Meridian's CEO for tomorrow. If we can close this deal, Marcus will realize someone is actively working against him. That's when things get interesting. As I looked out at the Manhattan skyline, I thought about the year ahead. Marcus believed he was hunting a helpless prey, but he was about to discover he'd been wrong about everything, especially about underestimating his wife. The role reversal was complete. Now the real game could begin. Chakisatoli's, the Meridian Industries headquarters, occupied 30 floors of gleaming steel and glass in Midtown Manhattan. As Jennifer and I stepped into the elevator to meet CEO David Rousseau, I caught her nervous thoughts. This is either going to be brilliant or catastrophic. If Marcus finds out Rebecca is here, relax, I whispered. He thinks I'm at a spa retreat in the Hamptons. The lie had been easy to sell. I'd shown Marcus brochures for an exclusive wellness center, complete with a digital detox policy that would explain my radio silence. Meanwhile, his thoughts had been occupied with other matters. Perfect. 3 days alone with Vanessa, I can tell her about the Cayman Islands accounts. David Rousseau was exactly what I'd expected from his profile. Mid-50s, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of someone who'd built a tech empire from nothing. But his thoughts revealed a man under siege. "Ms. Hayes, Mrs. Wellington," he said, shaking our hands. "I'll be honest, your offer came at the perfect time. Wellington Financial has been circling us like vultures for months." Jennifer took the lead. "We understand Marcus Wellington has been applying pressure through various channels." "Pressure is an understatement," Rousseau replied grimly. "He's been targeting our key clients, spreading rumors about our financial stability, and somehow convinced 2 of our board members to push for a sale." I leaned forward, accessing the memory of my previous life. Those board members wouldn't happen to be Harrison Mills and Patricia Vance, would they? Rousseau's surprise was evident. "How did you—" "Lucky guess," I said smoothly, though my mind reading had caught his thoughts. "How does she know about our internal conflicts? Unless Wellington's wife is working against him?" The pieces were falling into place perfectly. In my previous timeline, Marcus had bragged about acquiring Meridian after my death, mentioning how easy it had been once he'd convinced certain board members. Now I understood. He'd been bribing them. "Mr. Rousseau," I said carefully, "what if I told you we have evidence of financial impropriety in those board members' recent decisions?" Jennifer shot me a questioning look, but I pressed on. "And what if we could offer you something Wellington Financial never could, genuine partnership instead of a hostile takeover?" For the next 2 hours, we laid out our proposal. Hayes Capital would acquire a 40% stake in Meridian, providing the cash injection they needed while maintaining their independence. More importantly, I revealed my access to a network of family trust funds that could provide long-term stability. "This is substantial," Rousseau said, reviewing our financial projections. His thoughts were racing. "If this is legitimate, it would make us untouchable. Wellington couldn't strong-arm us anymore." "There's one condition," I added. "Complete discretion. My involvement cannot be disclosed to anyone outside this room." Rousseau nodded slowly. "May I ask why?" "Let's just say I have my reasons for keeping this from my husband." The understanding in his eyes was immediate. Corporate marriages were complicated, and he'd clearly dealt with similar situations before. 3 days later, I returned home to find Marcus in his study, speaking rapidly into his phone in hushed tones. His body language screamed frustration. "Don't care what it costs. Find out who's backing Hayes Capital. Someone just outmaneuvered us on Meridian, and I want to know who." I knocked softly and entered, playing the part of the refreshed wife returning from her spa retreat. "Darling, I'm back," I said, wrapping my arms around his shoulders from behind. His thoughts were turbulent. Fucking Meridian deal fell through. Someone with serious money is playing games. At least Rebecca's back to provide some stress relief. "How was your retreat?" he asked, ending his call abruptly. "Wonderfully relaxing. I feel like a new person." The irony wasn't lost on me. "How were things here?" "Busy. Very busy." His mental voice was bitter. 3 days of Vanessa asking when we're going public with our relationship. I need Rebecca's inheritance secured before I can make any moves. That evening at dinner, Marcus seemed distracted, barely touching his wine. I seized the opportunity to gather intelligence. "You seem stressed, honey. Anything I can help with?" He looked up, and for a moment his thoughts sharpened. "Actually, Rebecca has connections I haven't fully utilized. Her family's business network could be useful." "Just some acquisition challenges," he said aloud. "Nothing for you to worry about. You know, my cousin Bradley mentioned he's looking for investment opportunities, something about diversifying the family portfolio." Another lie, but one that would seem natural given my background. Marcus's interest piqued immediately. "Bradley Hartwell? From Hartwell Industries?" "The same. He controls about 40% of the family's investment decisions now that grandfather passed." I watched Marcus's mental wheels turning. "Hartwell Industries has connections across 3 sectors I need. If I could access their network through Rebecca, Perhaps you should meet with him, I suggested innocently. That's actually a brilliant idea. Could you arrange something? Of course, darling. What Marcus didn't know was that Cousin Bradley was currently backpacking through Europe and completely unreachable. But the fictional meeting would buy me time and keep Marcus focused on legitimate business instead of his elimination timeline. The next morning brought our first major victory. Jennifer called with barely contained excitement. Rebecca, turn on CNBC now. I grabbed the remote, switching to the financial news channel just as the anchor began speaking. In a surprise move, Meridian Industries announced a strategic partnership with Hayes Capital, effectively blocking Wellington Financial's attempted acquisition. The deal, reportedly worth $200 million, comes from an anonymous investor with significant backing. Marcus's roar of rage echoed from his study. I could hear him on the phone. How the hell did Hayes Capital come up with that kind of money? I want a full investigation into their funding sources. His thoughts were even more volatile. Someone is deliberately sabotaging my plans. This can't be a coincidence. Hayes Capital was supposed to be finished by now. I knocked on his study door, carrying a tray of coffee and pastries. I thought you might need some fuel, I said sweetly, setting the tray on his desk. Did you see the news? He asked, gesturing at his monitor. About that tech company. Isn't that wonderful for your friend Jennifer? Marcus's suspicion flared. Friend Jennifer? Since when does Rebecca care about Jennifer's business? I mean, I know you two don't get along, but I've always liked her, I said, arranging his coffee just the way he preferred it. We don't not get along, Marcus said carefully. We simply have different approaches to business. His thoughts revealed the truth. Different approaches my ass. She's been a thorn in my side for years. Too smart, too connected, too dangerous to Rebecca's independence. Well, I'm just glad someone is doing well in this economy, I said, kissing his cheek before leaving. Behind me, I heard Marcus grab his phone. Vanessa, I need you to dig up everything you can on Hayes Capital's recent funding. Someone is playing games, and I want to know who. That afternoon, I met Jennifer at a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's financial district and any chance encounters with Marcus's network. He's rattled, she reported. My sources say Wellington Financial is pulling resources from 3 other deals to investigate our backing. Good. Let him waste time and money chasing shadows. Rebecca, are you sure about this path? Once Marcus realizes you're involved, there's no going back. I thought about my previous life. The betrayal, the loneliness, the terrifying moment when I realized Marcus intended to kill me. Then I thought about Vanessa, probably picking out wedding rings while planning my demise. There was never going back anyway, I said. He sealed both our fates the moment he decided I was expendable. Jennifer nodded grimly. Then let's make sure we win. Over the next week, we executed 3 more strategic moves. Hayes Capital acquired a struggling logistics company that Marcus needed for his offshore operations. We outbid Wellington Financial on a data security firm. Most satisfying of all, we convinced 2 of Marcus's major clients to switch their portfolios to our management. Each victory was small but significant, like removing stones from the foundation of Marcus's empire. And with every win, I could hear his growing desperation in his thoughts. The hunter was learning what it felt like to be hunted. Wef. 3 weeks into my campaign against Marcus, I discovered something that changed everything. It started with an accidental encounter at Bergdorf Goodman, where I had gone to maintain my cover as the shopping-obsessed wife. I was examining a Hermes scarf when I heard familiar laughter from the jewelry section. Vanessa Torres stood at the Cartier counter, her glossy black hair cascading over her shoulders as she tried on an enormous diamond ring. But she wasn't alone. A distinguished older man with salt and pepper hair was leaning close to her, his hand possessively on her lower back. I recognized him immediately. Richard Blackstone, CEO of Blackstone Enterprises and one of Marcus's biggest business rivals. It's perfect, darling, Blackstone murmured, his thoughts crystal clear to me. Marcus has no idea his precious secretary has been feeding me information for months. The fool thinks she's devoted to him. Vanessa's mental voice was equally revealing. Richard pays better and doesn't make me pretend to love him. Marcus is just a stepping stone to real power. I ducked behind a display case, my mind reeling. Vanessa wasn't just Marcus's accomplice in my planned murder. She was a double agent working for his biggest competitor. The woman Marcus trusted with his deepest secrets was selling him out. I followed them at a distance as they moved through the store, listening to their conversation. The Cayman accounts should be fully accessible by next month, Vanessa said quietly. Marcus is transferring Rebecca's trust fund money in stages to avoid detection. Excellent, Blackstone replied. Once we have the account numbers, we can expose his embezzlement to the SEC. Wellington Financial will collapse overnight. My previous death suddenly made terrifying sense. Marcus hadn't just been planning to kill me for my inheritance. He'd been embezzling it, and Vanessa was positioning herself to destroy him after I was gone. She would have walked away with both men's fortunes while they destroyed each other. I needed to warn Marcus, despite everything he'd done. Not out of love, but because Vanessa's betrayal gave me leverage I hadn't expected. That evening, Marcus came home later than usual, his thoughts chaotic with stress and paranoia. Darling, you look exhausted, I said, helping him out of his coat. Rough day? Someone leaked details about the Morrison acquisition to the Wall Street Journal, he said grimly. The deal fell through before we could close. His thoughts were darker. There's a mole somewhere in my organization, someone with access to confidential information. But who? Perfect. I poured him a scotch and settled beside him on the sofa. Maybe it's time to be more careful about who you trust, I suggested gently. Marcus looked at me sharply. What do you mean? Well, you work such long hours with so many people. Sometimes those closest to us aren't who they seem to be. His paranoia spiked. Is she hinting at something? Does Rebecca know about Vanessa? I'm just saying that in business, loyalty can be flexible. That night, I lay awake planning my next move. I had two choices: expose Vanessa's betrayal to Marcus directly, or use this information more strategically. The latter option won. The next morning, I called Jennifer with an emergency meeting request. Rebecca, you look like you've seen a ghost, she said when I arrived at her office. Close. I've seen the future, and it's more complicated than we thought. I revealed everything about Vanessa's double game with Blackstone, watching Jennifer's expression shift from shock to calculating interest. This is huge, she said finally. If Blackstone is planning to expose Marcus's embezzlement, we need to position ourselves carefully. We don't want to get caught in the crossfire. Unless we control the crossfire, I said. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? What if we approach Blackstone directly? Offer him something better than Vanessa's intelligence? Like what? Marcus's complete financial records. Bank account numbers, offshore holdings, shell company structures, everything. Jennifer's eyes widened. Rebecca, that would mean complete destruction of Wellington Financial, yes, but it would also mean justice for everyone Marcus has hurt, including his future victims. We spent the afternoon crafting our approach to Blackstone. Rather than walking in cold, we decided to use my social connections. Richard Blackstone's wife, Catherine, served on the same museum board as my mother. A carefully arranged introduction at the upcoming gala would seem natural. But first, I needed to gather the evidence. That weekend, Marcus announced he was flying to Chicago for a client emergency. His thoughts revealed the truth. Vanessa's taking the weekend off. Perfect time to advance our Cayman timeline without her hovering. The moment his car disappeared down our street, I was in his study. This time, I wasn't just photographing documents. I was copying entire drives, using equipment Jennifer had provided. Every transaction, every hidden account, every illegal transfer was now in my possession. But the most damning discovery was a folder labeled insurance policy. Inside were detailed psychological evaluations of me, medical records, and what appeared to be a timeline for inducing a mental breakdown. Subject shows increasing isolation and dependency, one report read. Recommend accelerating psychological pressure through financial restrictions and social alienation. Target breakdown 6 to 8 months. Marcus hadn't just been planning to kill me. He'd been systematically destroying my mental health first, creating a narrative that would make my eventual suicide seem believable. I photographed everything with shaking hands, then carefully restored his files to their original state. As I was preparing to leave, I heard the front door open. Rebecca? I'm home. Panic shot through me. Marcus wasn't supposed to return until Sunday evening. I quickly shut down his computer and slipped out the back of his study just as his footsteps approached. There you are, he said, finding me in the kitchen arranging flowers. Flight got canceled. Chicago will have to wait. His thoughts were frustrated. Damn airline. I needed to access those accounts today. Now I'll have to wait until Monday. What a shame. I said sympathetically. But I'm glad you're home. I missed you. The lie came easier each time. Monday morning brought the museum gala, and with it, my first direct move against both Marcus and Vanessa. Catherine Blackstone was exactly as I'd expected. Elegant, intelligent, and surprisingly well-informed about her husband's business dealings. "Rebecca Wellington," she said when my mother introduced us. "I've heard so much about you from Richard. He speaks very highly of your husband's entrepreneurial spirit." The subtle emphasis on quote told me everything. The Blackstones knew exactly what kind of man Marcus was. "Your husband is quite the strategist himself," I replied carefully. "I imagine he sees opportunities others miss." "Indeed. Perhaps we should arrange for our husbands to meet properly. Richard is always interested in mutually beneficial relationships." The code was clear. Within an hour, I had an invitation to dinner at the Blackstone estate the following weekend. That evening, I watched Marcus scroll through his phone, his thoughts increasingly agitated. "Something wrong, darling?" I asked. "Vanessa hasn't returned my calls all day." "It's not like her." What Marcus didn't know was that Vanessa was currently in the Hamptons with Blackstone, finalizing their plans to destroy him. But he would learn soon enough. "I'm sure she's just busy," I said. "Isn't tomorrow a big day for some acquisition?" "How did you—" Marcus stopped himself, but his thoughts completed the sentence. How did she know about the Morrison follow-up? I never mentioned it to her. His paranoia was growing, and soon it would consume him entirely. Between Vanessa's betrayal and my strategic strikes against his business, Marcus Wellington was discovering what it felt like to lose control. The hidden truth was finally emerging, and it was more twisted than anyone could have imagined. But I was ready to use every revelation to my advantage. After all, I had learned from the master manipulator himself. The Blackstone estate in the Hamptons was a testament to old money, sprawling grounds, impeccable gardens, and a house that whispered power rather than shouting it. As Marcus and I walked up the circular drive, I could hear his thoughts churning with ambition and suspicion. "Remember, Rebecca, this is purely social," he murmured, straightening his tie. "Just smile and let me handle the conversation." His mental voice was calculating. Blackstone invited us for a reason. Either he wants to propose an alliance, or he's planning to crush me. Either way, I need to stay sharp. What Marcus didn't know was that Richard Blackstone had already received a very special delivery that morning. Copies of every financial document I'd stolen from Marcus's study, along with a detailed analysis of his embezzlement scheme. Catherine Blackstone greeted us at the door, resplendent in cream silk and pearls. Her thoughts were amused. Poor Marcus has no idea what's coming. Rebecca, on the other hand, there's more to her than meets the eye. "Marcus, Rebecca, how wonderful to see you again," she said warmly. "Richard is so looking forward to this evening." Richard Blackstone emerged from his study, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. At 62, he commanded respect through presence alone. His handshake with Marcus was firm, professional, and completely predatory. "Wellington," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been wanting to discuss some mutual interests." His thoughts were razor sharp. Let's see how long it takes him to realize his secretary has been feeding me everything for months. Dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as polite conversation. As we worked through courses of expertly prepared cuisine, Richard casually mentioned several business deals, all of which Marcus had lost in recent months. "The Morrison acquisition was particularly interesting," Richard said, cutting his lamb with surgical precision. "I heard the deal fell through due to some unfortunate leaks to the press." Marcus's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Leaks happen in business. It's the nature of the beast." "Indeed, though one has to wonder about the source of such specific information." I watched Marcus's paranoia spike through his thoughts. How much does he know? And how does he know it? "Speaking of sources," I interjected smoothly, "I heard Vanessa Torres has been making quite a name for herself in financial circles. Such a talented young woman?" The effect was immediate. Marcus's face paled slightly, while Richard's smile became genuinely amused. "Ah, yes, Ms. Torres," Richard said. "Quite talented indeed. In fact, she's been invaluable in helping me understand certain things. Market dynamics." Marcus set down his wine glass with trembling fingers. His thoughts were in freefall. "He knows about Vanessa. How much does he know? How long has this been going on? Excuse me, Marcus said tightly. I need to make a phone call. As soon as he left the dining room, Richard leaned toward me. Your husband is about to have a very unpleasant conversation with his secretary, he said quietly. Is he? I replied innocently. Catherine laughed. Rebecca, you're much more interesting than Richard led me to believe. I have my moments. Through the French doors, I could see Marcus pacing on the terrace, his phone pressed to his ear. His body language screamed fury and betrayal. She's not answering, Richard observed, checking his own phone. Probably because she's currently in my Malibu house, uploading the final batch of financial records you missed. I maintained my composure, though internally I was thrilled. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Of course not. Just as I'm sure you had nothing to do with the comprehensive dossier on your husband's illegal activities that arrived at my office this morning. When Marcus returned, his face was ashen. His thoughts were chaos. Vanessa's phone goes straight to voicemail. Her apartment building says she moved out yesterday. What the hell is happening? Everything all right, Marcus? Richard asked with false concern. Fine. Just fine. Marcus's voice was strained. Actually, I think Rebecca and I should head home. She's been feeling under the weather. Oh, but we haven't even discussed the real reason for tonight's dinner, Richard said, his tone shifting to something much more dangerous. He stood and walked to a side table, returning with a manila folder thick with documents. You see, Marcus, I've recently come into possession of some fascinating financial records, offshore accounts, shell corporations, embezzled trust funds. He opened the folder, revealing bank statements with Marcus's name attached. Quite the elaborate scheme you've constructed. Marcus went rigid. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, I'm stating facts. Richard's voice was ice cold. You've been stealing from your wife's inheritance, funneling money through illegal channels, and planning what I can only assume was her eventual demise to cover your tracks. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's thoughts were a tornado of panic. How does he have these records? Only Vanessa and I knew about the offshore accounts. Unless she's been working for him all along. Where is Vanessa? Marcus demanded. Safe, Richard replied. Unlike what you had planned for your wife. Marcus turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. His thoughts were desperate. Rebecca knows. Somehow, she knows everything. But how long has she known? How much has she told them? Hello, Marcus, I said quietly. Surprised? The mask finally slipped completely. Marcus's face contorted with rage and desperation. You manipulative bitch, he snarled. How long have you been planning this? About as long as you've been planning to kill me, I replied calmly. He lunged toward me, but Richard was faster. In one smooth motion, he pressed a button on his phone. And within seconds, 2 men in dark suits entered the dining room. Marcus Wellington, one of them said, producing a badge. FBI, you're under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. As they read him his rights, Marcus's thoughts turned vicious. This isn't over. Even if they arrest me, I have contingencies. People who owe me favors. Rebecca thinks she's won, but she has no idea what's coming. But I could hear every word, every threat, every desperate plan forming in his mind. After Marcus was led away in handcuffs, Richard poured himself a fresh glass of wine. Quite the performance, he said. Though I have to ask, how did you know about Vanessa's double game? Let's just say I'm more observant than my husband gave me credit for. Indeed. And now? I thought about the question carefully. Marcus was in custody, but his arrest was just the beginning. He had lawyers, connections, and, as his thoughts had revealed, contingency plans I didn't fully understand yet. Now we make sure he can never hurt anyone again, I said. We? Catherine asked with interest, if you'll have me. I have something neither of you possess. Intimate knowledge of every aspect of Marcus's criminal network. Richard smiled, and for the first time, it seemed genuine. I think this is the beginning of a very productive partnership. As we discussed the details of dismantling Marcus's empire completely, I felt a satisfaction I'd never experienced in either life. For years, I'd been a victim of other people's manipulations. Now I am writing my own story. But even as we celebrated the first victory, I knew the war was far from over. Marcus Wellington might be in custody, but men like him didn't go down without taking others with them. The counterattack had begun, and the stakes were about to get much, much higher. 3 days after Marcus's arrest, I discovered just how deep his contingency plans ran. It started with a phone call at 3 a.m. that woke me from the first peaceful sleep I'd had in months. "Mrs. Wellington?" The voice was unfamiliar, gravelly. "You need to listen very carefully. Your husband has friends who don't appreciate what you've done." My blood turned to ice, but my mind-reading ability caught something unexpected. The caller's thoughts were nervous, almost reluctant. God, I hate threatening women, but Marcus pays too well to refuse, and I need the money for my daughter's surgery. "Who is this?" I demanded. "Someone who owes Marcus a favor. He wants you to know that federal prison can't protect him from his business partners. And if you testify against him, those same partners might decide you're a liability." The line went dead, but I'd heard enough in his thoughts to know this wasn't an empty threat. Marcus had deeper connections than I'd realized, connections that operated outside the law. I immediately called Richard Blackstone. "They're trying to intimidate me," I said without preamble when he answered. "I expected as much. Pack a bag. You're staying at my Manhattan penthouse until we can arrange proper security." "Richard, there's something else." The man who called me. I could tell he didn't want to be making threats. "Marcus is leveraging desperate people, not just criminals." "Interesting. We might be able to use that." 2 hours later, I was ensconced in Blackstone's fortified penthouse, complete with ex-Secret Service security detail. But safety came with a price. I was essentially under house arrest, while Marcus's lawyers worked to discredit me. The next morning brought devastating news. Jennifer called with panic in her voice. "Rebecca, they're coming after Hayes Capital. The SEC received an anonymous tip about our funding sources. They're launching a full investigation." "Marcus's reach is longer than we thought," I said grimly. "There's more. Someone leaked to the financial press that you're the anonymous investor behind our recent acquisitions. Your name is all over the Wall Street Journal this morning." I hung up and immediately turned on the financial news. My face filled the screen alongside headlines screaming about "The Scorned Wife's Revenge" and "Wellington Financial Scandal Deepens." But it was the text crawling across the bottom of the screen that made my heart stop. Breaking. Federal judge grants Marcus Wellington bail due to procedural errors in arrest warrant. Richard appeared in the doorway, his expression dark. "He's out. Bail was set at $50 million, and somehow he made it. How is that possible? Someone with very deep pockets wanted him free. The question is why?" The answer came 12 hours later in the most unexpected way possible. I was reviewing legal documents in Richard's study when my mind-reading ability picked up thoughts that shouldn't have been there. Thoughts from inside the penthouse. "Phase 2 is in motion. Marcus is free, and now we can implement the real plan." I looked around frantically. Richard was on the phone in his office. The security team was positioned throughout the apartment, but someone was thinking about betraying us, and they were close. Then I saw her, Catherine Blackstone, walking past the study with a glass of wine, her elegant smile hiding thoughts that chilled me to the bone. Poor Rebecca thinks she's safe here. She has no idea that Richard and Marcus have been working together from the beginning. This whole feud was orchestrated to flesh out exactly what she knew and who she was working with. My world collapsed in an instant. I forced myself to remain calm, continue reading, act normal. But my mind was racing. If Catherine was right, then everything, Marcus's arrest, Vanessa's betrayal, even my alliance with Richard, had been an elaborate setup. But as I listened deeper to Catherine's thoughts, I caught something that gave me hope. At least Richard doesn't know I've been feeding information to the FBI. Marcus and Richard may be partners, but they're about to learn what real betrayal looks like. A triple agent. Catherine was playing both her husband and Marcus while working with federal law enforcement. The revelation meant I wasn't alone, but it also meant the situation was far more dangerous than I'd realized. That evening, Richard announced he was hosting a dinner party. "Just a few business associates," he said casually. "Nothing formal." His thoughts told a different story. Time to end this charade. "Marcus will be here tonight, and will finally deal with Rebecca permanently. I excused myself to freshen up, but instead went to the secure bathroom where I'd hidden a burner phone. I called the FBI agent who'd been handling Marcus's case. Agent Morrison? This is Rebecca Wellington. I need immediate extraction. This situation has changed dramatically. Mrs. Wellington, we've been monitoring the situation. Stay exactly where you are. Help is closer than you think. 20 minutes later, the dinner guests began arriving. I recognized several faces from New York's financial elite. But it was the last guest who confirmed my worst fears. Marcus walked in wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his smile cold and triumphant. The moment he saw me, his thoughts rang out clear and vicious. Did you really think you could outmaneuver me, Rebecca? I've been playing this game since before you were born. Darling, he said aloud, crossing the room to kiss my cheek. You look beautiful. Prison orange really isn't my color. I'm so glad to be back in civilization. Marcus, I replied evenly, you're looking well for someone facing federal charges. Oh, those charges won't stick. Amazing how evidence can disappear when the right pressure is applied. Richard raised his glass for a toast. To partnership, he said, his eyes moving between Marcus and me, and to the resolution of complicated situations. The other guests raised their glasses, but I noticed Catherine barely touching hers to her lips. Her thoughts were focused. The recording devices are active. Everything they say tonight will be admissible in court. Marcus moved closer to me, his voice dropping to a whisper. I have to admit, Rebecca, your little rebellion was impressive. But it's over now. Tonight, you're going to sign documents transferring all your remaining assets to me. Then you're going to disappear. And if I refuse, then you'll disappear anyway, but it will be much less pleasant. The threat was delivered with such casual menace that several guests nearby fell silent, but I could hear their thoughts: shock, discomfort, and in some cases, genuine fear. These weren't all Marcus's allies. Some were witnesses who didn't know what they'd walked into. Actually, Marcus, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, I have a different proposal. The room went quiet. Marcus's smile faltered slightly. You see, everyone, I continued, standing and addressing the room. My husband has been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. He thinks I'm the same naive woman he married. But people change. Sometimes, they even come back from the dead with a very different perspective. Marcus's face darkened. Rebecca, you're embarrassing yourself. Am I? Because I think our guests would be very interested to know about the murder-for-hire contract you took out on me. Or the embezzlement scheme. Or the fact that you've been working with organized crime to launder money through shell corporations. Enough, Marcus snarled, lunging toward me. But before he could reach me, the penthouse doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn, led by Agent Morrison. Nobody moves, FBI. In the chaos that followed, I heard Marcus's final, desperate thoughts. How did they know? Who betrayed the plan? I looked directly at him and smiled. Sometimes, Marcus, the dead have very good hearing. As federal agents placed him in handcuffs for the second time, Marcus finally understood. Not just that I had outmaneuvered him, but that I possessed knowledge and abilities he couldn't explain or counter. This isn't possible, he whispered as they led him away. You can't know what you know. Goodbye, Marcus, I said. Enjoy your permanent vacation in federal prison. Richard Blackstone was arrested, along with 3 other dinner guests who turned out to be co-conspirators in Marcus's criminal enterprise. Catherine, revealed as an FBI informant, had been instrumental in building the case against her own husband. As the penthouse cleared and silence returned, I stood at the window overlooking Manhattan, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I had died as a victim. Tonight, I had orchestrated the downfall of everyone who had betrayed me. He saw Ferricolti, P saw Ferricolti saw Pharaoh. The ultimate revelation wasn't just about Marcus's crimes or Richard's deception. It was about discovering who I truly was when I stopped being afraid and started fighting back. But even as I savored the victory, I knew the real work was just beginning. There was a fortune to recover, a life to rebuild, and a future to create on my own terms. 6 months after Marcus's final arrest, I stood in the boardroom of what was once Wellington Financial, now renamed Hartwell Industries. The mahogany table where Marcus had plotted my demise was covered with documents that told a very different story, one of redemption, restitution, and rebirth. Agent Morrison sat across from me, sliding a thick folder across the polished surface. "The asset recovery is complete, Mrs. Wellington, or should I say, Miss Hartwell." I had legally reclaimed my maiden name the day Marcus's conviction became final. Rebecca Wellington had died twice, once literally, once symbolically. Rebecca Hartwell was something entirely new. "How much?" I asked, though the mind-reading ability that had saved my life let me hear his thoughts. 47 million recovered, plus the legitimate business assets. She's wealthier now than when this whole nightmare started. 47 million from the offshore accounts, he said aloud. Plus another 63 million in business assets once we liquidated the shell corporations. Marcus's sentence was increased to 25 years without parole when we proved the organized crime connections. I nodded, feeling a satisfaction that went beyond money. And Richard Blackstone? 15 years. His cooperation in exposing Marcus's broader network earned him a reduced sentence. Agent Morrison paused. "Your testimony was crucial in both cases. Without your unique insights into their operations, we never would have uncovered the full scope of their crimes." If only he knew how unique those insights truly were. What about Vanessa Torres? Witness protection. Her information about the international money laundering ring led to 17 additional arrests across 3 countries. She'll serve 2 years in minimum security, then disappear forever. A fitting end for someone who had played all sides. Vanessa would survive, but she'd spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. After Agent Morrison left, I walked through the offices that were now mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had spent years stealing my inheritance to build his empire, only to have that empire become mine when his crimes were exposed. But I wasn't keeping it. Not all of it. Westaw. Jennifer arrived for our afternoon meeting, carrying architectural blueprints and a smile that could power half of Manhattan. "The community center groundbreaking is scheduled for next month," she said, spreading the plans across my desk. "The Rebecca Hartwell Foundation for Domestic Violence Survivors will be operational by Christmas." Perfect. I studied the blueprints for the facility that would house legal aid, counseling services, and emergency shelter for women escaping dangerous relationships. And the scholarship program? Fully funded. We'll be able to send 50 women per year to business school, with full living expenses covered. Jennifer looked up from the plans. "Rebecca, this is incredible. You're literally saving lives. I thought about my previous life, how isolated and helpless I'd felt, how I'd had no one to turn to when I realized Marcus's true nature. No woman should ever feel that trapped again." "Speaking of saving lives," I said, "how's Catherine adjusting to civilian life?" Catherine Blackstone had been quietly relocated after testifying against her husband. Her FBI handler had connected us, and I'd offered her a position as head of security consulting for the foundation. She'd accepted, saying she wanted to use her skills for something that mattered. "She's remarkable," Jennifer replied. "Turns out, 20 years of living with a sociopathic husband teaches you a lot about identifying predators." She's developing training programs that are already being adopted by law enforcement agencies nationwide. A knock on my office door interrupted our planning session. My assistant announced that someone was here to see me, someone unexpected. David Rousseau, the CEO of Meridian Industries, entered with a bouquet of white roses and an expression of deep gratitude. "Ms. Hartwell," he said, "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit." "Of course not. Please, sit." His thoughts were humble and amazed. If she hadn't warned us about Marcus's sabotage attempts, we would have lost everything. She saved our company and asked for nothing in return. "I wanted to thank you personally," he said. The anonymous tip about Marcus's plan to destroy our data servers saved Meridian Industries. We've tripled our valuation since then. I had used my knowledge of Marcus's timeline to warn several of his intended victims. Not all of them had believed me initially, but those who listened had avoided catastrophic losses. "I'm just glad I could help," I said simply. "Actually, I'm here with a proposal." David pulled out a tablet and showed me financial projections. "Meridian wants to partner with the Hartwell Foundation. We're developing an app that helps domestic violence survivors escape safely. Encrypted messaging, GPS spoofing, secure financial planning tools. We want to make it free to anyone who needs it." "That's incredibly generous." "It's incredibly necessary. My sister," he paused, his thoughts revealing painful memories. "She didn't make it out of her marriage alive. If this app had existed then, she might still be here." I studied the technical specifications, seeing the potential to save countless lives. What do you need from me? Funding for development and distribution. About $5 million to start. Done. The decision was immediate. But I want Catherine Blackstone involved in the security protocols. Her expertise in this area is unmatched. As David left, energized about the project ahead, I realized something profound had shifted in my relationship with wealth. In my previous life, money had been something that happened to me, an inheritance I'd passively managed while playing the role of trophy wife. Now it was a tool for creating change, for ensuring that other women wouldn't suffer as I had. That evening, I had dinner alone in my new penthouse, not the one I'd shared with Marcus, but a space I'd chosen and designed myself. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Central Park, but it was the simple pleasure of eating what I wanted, when I wanted, without calculating how it might affect someone else's mood, that truly mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Martha Chen. I was your housekeeper. I heard about what happened to Mr. Marcus. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. You're stronger than I ever imagined." Mrs. Chen had found new employment with a family that treated her with respect and dignity. She'd been one of many household staff members who testified about Marcus's abusive behavior and suspicious activities. Their courage had helped ensure his conviction. I typed back, "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Chen. Your kindness meant more than you'll ever know." As night fell over Manhattan, I stood at my window thinking about the journey that had brought me here. A year and a half ago, I had died believing I was powerless. Tonight, I was one of the most influential women in New York, commanding a fortune built on justice rather than theft. But the most remarkable change wasn't in my bank account. It was in my reflection. The woman looking back at me from the darkened window was confident, purposeful, and unafraid. She had learned to trust her instincts, to value her own judgment, and to never again allow someone else to control her story. The mind-reading ability that had saved my life was fading now, as if it had served its purpose and was no longer needed. I found I didn't miss it. I had learned to read people in other ways, through their actions, their patterns, their choices under pressure. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. The foundation was expanding internationally. The domestic violence app was launching its beta test. Congress was considering legislation I'd helped draft to close loopholes in financial abuse laws. But tonight was for gratitude. Gratitude for a second chance that most people never receive. Gratitude for the courage to fight back when fighting seemed impossible. Gratitude for allies who had appeared when I needed them most. Most of all, gratitude for discovering that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something so beautiful from the ashes of betrayal that the world becomes a better place. I raised a glass of wine to my reflection in the window, to the city spread out below, and to all the women who would never know how close they'd come to tragedy, because someone had taken the time to build them a way out. "Here's to new beginnings," I whispered to the night. And somewhere in the darkness, I could have sworn I heard the future whispering back, "Here's to the woman you were always meant to be." The story of Rebecca Wellington had ended in death and betrayal. But the story of Rebecca Hartwell was just beginning, and it would be written entirely on her own terms. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.